in Southern California, broadcasting live on the powerofvoices.com. And of course, download our free app. Download that app and you'll be mainlining us right here on Apple and Android. You get that free app hooked up into your smartphone. We are broadcasting live on the radio and on everywhere, on the air, and from the community to the world. We're here for you. Also, we're on facebooklive.com/Jesse Terrero. As it's a little bit slow on my Facebook site, you can bridge over to our YouTube Live site if you would like to. That's YouTube Live from the Power of Voices, or go to our website at www.thepowerofvoices.com, or catch us also on facebook.com/The Power of Voices. We're a little bit slow as we're trying to get that connection lined up for, but we're running nice and smooth on the other ones. As we Skype in from an undisclosed location here in Southern California, it's good to be back with you on another beautiful day, another beautiful fall day in California and the rest of the world and the rest of the country is going here to us in Southern California. It's good to be with you today. Through the week, real estate, and we always try to talk about money and try to get some information out that would be very helpful for you and your family. So we want you to chime in, ask any questions that you have. I lost my glasses, so I'm trying to read what I can read. I don't know if I'll be able to get everybody's name right. I was out doing some loan specialist for over 37 years, almost 40 years now here in Southern California. Been handling money, doing loans, and selling real estate for folks and helping them find a real estate property to buy and such. So we're going to be talking about I have come across, if you saw the promo earlier, I have come across a way in which as we try to on our Facebook page. We're trying to keep that connection here on Jesse Terrero's Facebook page. So I want to live page from the Power of Voices. That feed is running a lot smoother. Jesse Terrero. So that feed is running a lot smoother. And if you can't go over there, because we're going to break up a little bit here. Afraid that the router would take off. Please go out to that area, and I promise you'll be running smooth. Saying hi to Larry Cochran. Hey, we got a great show lined up for you, Larry, and Jesse Andrew Terrero is watching. I'm going to teach my son and you, Larry, about some money. Money, 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 money. Before you can do anything in the world and get involved in this billion-dollar idea that's happening out in a small little sleepy town in the desert here in Southern California. Would you have ever imagined? Just think about that. Go figure. A small sleepy town in the desert of Southern California is going to become the next boom town in America. I'll be talking about that here in about a half hour, so I'm teasing you a little bit with that because I want you to understand money first. And so once we start understanding money, we can start talking about how to spend that money, how to make that money, how to save that money, and how to set yourself up for a lifetime of absolute quality that could go beyond your imagination. And here's the thing, it's all legal. That's right, it's me, Jesse T. I'm showing you a legal way that you're going to get on board, and I know it's going to be good for you. So we'll be talking about that at about 5:30 at the bottom of the hour on the Jesse T Show. Saying hi to Reverend James Stern. Hi, Reverend. How you doing? Thanks a lot for the interview a couple of months ago, and we are joining your fight, my friend, and we want to help you as much as we can in that fight. The Reverend's got a movie about his life story when he was in the Deep South in a prison with the original leader, well, the most famous leader in modern times of the KKK. and he was in the same prison cell with him for a long time. So he's got a lot of very unique and interesting stories and things that he's doing. Thanks a lot, Reverend, for having us on. Okay, let's get to talking about money right now, because this is going to be a little bit complicated. So I thought about this all day long. I actually started thinking about it last night. How can I break down a very complicated concept so that it doesn't just get disjointed and all mixed up? So I thought I would go back historically and bring you forward on this complicated subject of where does our money come from? Where does money come from? Now, I've asked that question to people all the time. Where does money come from? I bet if you ask 10 people where money comes from, you're going to get answers like, oh, it comes from the money tree, or it comes from my folks, or it comes from me working hard, or it comes from my job, or it comes from labor, or it comes from investments, or it comes from buying gold, or it comes from selling something. Well, those are all very interesting answers, but they are all completely wrong. Money does not come from any one of those sources. Yeah, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Yeah, the money in your pocket, which you think is money, which really isn't money. It's really what we think is money, because we've been designed and thought and created to believe that the money in our pockets is money, but it really isn't money. I'm going to explain that little paradox, that oxymoron that I just kind of went back and forth on right now as we begin our discussion on where does money come from. So I'm going to go back here to the year 1907. And in 1907, there was a major depression on the East Coast of all the major banks. We're talking all the big banks. Because you see, in 1907 here on the West Coast, folks, the only city that was really here of any significance on the West Coast in 1907 wasn't Los Angeles. It was still just an awakening little town, and it really didn't have much to offer. But San Francisco was the city. San Francisco was a city built on the gold coming from Sutter's Mill. San Francisco was a city that was built on the backs of the gold miners. And so San Francisco was the city. It was the main port. It was where all commerce was done. It was where all banking headquarters were at, and etc. Like Reno was the city prior to the Civil War, and going through the Civil War, Reno was the city of silver because of the Comstock lode that was hit in Nevada at Virginia City. Yes, there truly was a Virginia City. If you ever had a chance to go there, you got to check it out. It's on the way to Reno. Anyway, the Virginia, they hit the Comstock lode during the Civil War, and because the Union hit the Comstock lode, see, California really, they thought of California as a southern entity, but really it was a Union entity. There wasn't much fighting going on over here during the Civil War, and California had been in existence about 20 years. Most of the fighting, of course, was there done in the South and in that part of America. But this side of America, there wasn't really a lot of fighting going on. We had other problems like surviving here. But nevertheless, silver out of the Comstock lode built Reno, which was the capital of silver. And gold was built, San Francisco was built on the backs of the gold miners. So that was the capital of gold. Though gold was first found in California, here, of all places, in Placerita Canyon. That's just a few moments, about 75 or 80 minutes outside of downtown Los Angeles. Placerita Canyon was actually the first place that they found gold just before 1843, when California and 6 other states became part of the United States of America. Anyhow, nevertheless, I wanted to talk about gold and silver a little bit because it's important to understand. In 1907, the banking industry began a Great Depression. And for the most part, let me give you a name that you may recall from some studying or reading or something that you've seen on KCET, J.P. Morgan. Now, J.P. Morgan, of course, that's Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan/Chase, J.P. Morgan Bank. J.P. Morgan was a financier, and he bought out Andrew Carnegie for then a sum of very little in terms of money. But when Andrew Carnegie was 87 years old, the great steel magnate, he went back to Scotland and sold everything to the great financier, J.P. Morgan. And so J.P. Morgan was the Bank of America, literally. He was the wealthiest banker in America at the time, at the turn of the 20th century. And he was part of the Rothschild clan. He was part of the Rothschild entity. When you research his name backwards, you find major connections between he and the original Rothschilds out of Europe. Major connections. So in that respect, as I disconnect that phone, because people always call me during my radio show and my TV show, I don't know why that is. They just do. That's right, the Brown Beauty's on duty, but not with you right now. I'll be back with you in a second. All right, so J.P. Morgan, a lot of people say, and historically when you read it, there was a depression in 1907. And part of that depression was a carry-on from a depression that started in 1873. You see, America was broke after the Civil War. We were broke. We had nothing. We were broke. And so some very wealthy people like, let me say, J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers, who were just kind of starting to dig for oil in the Ohio Valley of Cleveland. Okay, they actually were digging for oil to create kerosene, not to create gasoline. So that's kind of how that went. And the Rockefeller, he was a young man, and J.P. Morgan was a little bit of an older man at that time. So in 1907, there was a major crash in the financial market here in America on the East Coast. And a lot of people say that J.P. Morgan instituted and created that on purpose so he could take over all the Eastern banks in New York, Boston, up and down New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, and Chicago, because he wanted to control those banks. And so there was a coup, sort of a coup de grace. And essentially what J.P. Morgan did when one of the banks across the street from one of his banks in New York, this is a simplified story, when that bank got into trouble and there was a run on the bank in 1907, J.P. Morgan stood out in front of his bank, literally, and said, hey guys, you come over to my bank, you're not getting your money out of your bank? Because at that time, a bank could only lend how much money they had on deposits and how much money they had in gold or silver reserves. They couldn't lend any more than what the value of that. So that changed, though, in 1910 and 1913, which we're going to get to in a second, dramatically. All right, so J.P. Morgan saw an opportunity here, and he had the money in his pocket. He was a very wealthy, perhaps the wealthiest financier of the time. And he stood across the street, literally, and he waved all the people, and he said, basically, come on over to my bank and deposit, and I will match your deposit or match your loss, and I will double it. So if you had $10 in the bank, and $10 to somebody in 1907 was quite a lot of money, believe me when I say that. If you had $10 in your bank that you worked very hard to save for, he would give you $10 and then match it with another 10 and put $20 in your account. So all the people in New York, and he did that in Boston and Baltimore, and he did that in Philadelphia, all the people started going to J.P. Morgan's bank, and those other banks went out of business, and he bought all those banks up and whatever reserves they had and whatever data files they had. Data has always been very important. And he bought all those properties, those real estate properties up for pennies on the dollar, literally nothing, and thus created his empire, and it really exploded on the scene even more, to the point that he became the wealthiest man, one of the wealthiest men in the world. His wealth was, at that time, over $400 million. Now, if you look at 1907, $400 million, and you equate it today to $400 million, you take for all of the years that has been, well over 100 years, you can see that $400 million is somewhere in the area. Mathematicians and economists say that was somewhere equal to somewhere in the area of, close to $1 trillion. Yeah, that's the buying capital that he had at the time. So he and Rockefeller, by the way, went in and paid off the Civil War debt. Just so you know that, with cash. And that happened around the turn of the century, 20th century, that is. All right, wow. It's funny how money and politics starts to marry itself after the Civil War. Important concept to understand as we talk about money and where it comes from today and how it's created. All right, so now he owns all these banks and he's got all of this power, and he and his cronies, let's just call them a cartel. And we're going to call them the cartel of Andrew Vanderlip Davidson, Strong, and Warburg. Well, these are all his palsy-wowsies. Okay, and they always go to his private island called Jekyll Island off of the East Coast, and they always hang out there off the Georgia coast. And Jekyll Island is a private club, a private island that J.P. Morgan owns. And they all hang out there quite a bit. So on the night of 1910, they all get in this train, which is a dark black train with the drapes and the louvers pulled, so nobody can see who's in the train. They go to Georgia, they get on a ship, and they go out to Jekyll Island, a boat. Andrew, Aldrich, Vanderlip, Davidson, Strong, and Warburg. Now, J.P. Morgan isn't present there, but let's go over to the cats who are there. Aldrich. Aldrich is part of the Rockefeller family. Okay? Aldrich represented the Rockefellers. He's part of the Rockefeller empire when you take him back. Andrew is the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury of the United States of America in 1910. Davidson is an executive in the J.P. Morgan conglomerate. He's a senior executive. Remember I said J.P. Morgan wasn't there. Strong is another emissary that speaks for J.P. Morgan. Warburg is the head of Wells Fargo. Vanderlip also is the president of National City Bank of New York. And Davidson, who's an executive, as I said, of the J.P. Morgan empire, he also is a major stockholder in the J.P. Morgan Bank. Okay, so you got a cartel going on here in secret at Jekyll Island, and here's why. After the 1907 Depression, when money kind of evaporated in this country, the concern of Congress and the president was that if there was a money run on all the banks in America, America would be out of business. That was the concern. Well, they wanted to do some legislation about that, and they were really worried. So they wanted to regulate the banking industry, because remember I said that J.P. Morgan kind of facilitated this 1907 blow-up? He did. Historically, you can check it out. So what went on here was Congress and the Senate and the president, Woodrow Wilson, they were very concerned about that happening again. They didn't want that to happen. So this cartel took it upon itself to have this secret meeting in Jekyll Island in 1910 to create what became known as a fiat financial, fractionalized economic system. Also became known as the Federal Reserve Bank, and they named it Federal Reserve so that Americans would think it's part of the government, but which it is not. They're autonomous to the United States government. No president, no congressman or senator, no police, CIA, or FBI can do anything to them. They are autonomous. Nobody has jurisdiction over the Federal Reserve. And so they got together and they created a document. And this is amazing. What you had is you had the top elite bankers creating a document that would police themselves. Now, wouldn't you like to have that? Wouldn't you like to set the law of the land, and you're a banker, to be able to create a document that you can pitch to the Congress, that they would vote on, that allows you to police yourself and not Congress or anybody else? Well, that's what they did. They created this document, which ultimately became the Federal Reserve Bank. And Congress went for it. There were some alterations, because by 1913, when Congress voted on it, 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress and the senators were back home at Christmas vacation celebrating, there was just enough for a quorum to be voted. A quorum means enough people to be voted. You have to have enough people to vote on something. in Congress and the Senate, and they passed this bill 2 days before Christmas, and Woodrow Wilson signed it off. This is why I've always said Woodrow Wilson was the greatest, America's greatest terrorist. Okay? So they created a document that allowed them to police themselves and nobody else could police them and create their own rules and regulations. Is that mind-boggling? Is that just, it gets even more dicey than that, guys. It gets more dicey than that, okay? All right, now check it out. What surprised them, JP Morgan, it blew his doors off. Okay, what surprised them is when Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, they also threw in that these cartels, the Federal Reserve, which is a cartel, okay, the Federal Reserve could have the power to issue the nation's money supply. Now, do you understand what I just said there? In 1913, Congress, of course the cartel was trying to get it, but they never thought they would get this. Was the wildest of their imaginations. Okay? Congress actually passed the bill and threw in a caveat that said, you know something? We're not going to let the United States Treasury or the president or our powers as given to us in the Constitution of the United States to regulate the monetary system of America. We're going to give all of that up to the Federal Reserve Bank, which we have no control over, that had built their own rules, that we give them their power, and we can never take it back. We're going to give them the right to issue the nation's monetary system and supply. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Oh my goodness gracious. Now, what I'm saying there is so powerful because basically they sold out you and me, America, at that point, 2 days before Christmas in 1913. All right, it gets better. Okay, so now Meyer Auschwitz Rothschild, I believe that's his middle name, Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the great banker of Europe and the world, the richest family in the planet Earth today. They're worth several trillions of dollars, okay? He said, you let me govern the nation's monetary supply and control it, and I don't care about governments or anything. I will rule the world. Okay, so now we understand how the Federal Reserve comes into play, because it's important to understand that. This is a very basic understanding of this, because it's important to understand when I answer the question, where does our money come from? And then I'm going to show you how to make a whole bunch of where that money comes from. Okay? So in 1910, they create this thing called the Federal Reserve Bank. It gets voted on in 1913. It goes into action. And oh, by the way, one of the cronies is the first president. And all the cronies are part of it. They're all chairmen. Okay? So now what we have here, and this is where it's going to get a little confusing. I'm going to try to get to it in a succinct kind of way. What we have here is we have an entity that's unregulated by anybody, has absolute power, absolutely, controls our currency, manipulates our interest rates, and can make secret bailouts and doesn't have to answer to anybody. Just go look what Bernanke, when Bernie Sanders was quizzing him in Congress. He flat out told Bernie Sanders, no, I'm not going to answer that question. Nobody can do anything. See, what they've created is they've created a system by which they can create money straight out of thin air. And that's what I'm about to explain. It used to be before 1913 that you had to have so much gold and silver, and the state issued their own currency. Okay? But now, under the concept of modern money mechanics that they wrote, this is their dissertation. This modern money mechanics was their plan and part of it. So follow me. I'm going to show you now how money is created out of thin air. It's called a fractionalized reserve system, banking system. So let's say the United States government needs some money. So they go to the Federal Reserve and they say, we need $10 billion. So the Federal Reserve says, okay, what do you got for it? So the United States government, through the United States Treasury, prints up a bunch of ink on a paper called bonds, Treasury bonds. So they sell them or trade them or give them to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve writes them a check for $10 billion. Okay? Now, then what the Fed does with those papers is they issue the check, and they don't issue gold or silver. They issue what's called a Federal Reserve note. See, if you look at the money before 1913, it says currency. If you look at the money after 1913, our dollar bills, it says Federal Reserve note. See, this is ink on paper that a note that the Federal Reserve issued for the bonds and the ink on paper that they get from the U.S. government, who needed $10 billion. So they issued $10 billion in Federal Reserve notes, not backed by anything, just backed by the fact that they needed to issue the notes for the bonds. Then what the Fed does after that, the notes are traded for the bonds, and $10 billion deposit is made by the United States government. Okay? So then what happens here, now the United States government has $10 billion to do whatever it wants to do. All right? Following me? And $10 billion has been added to the supply of the currency flowing through the system and flowing through the government and flowing through the country. Now, this is all done electronically today. It used to be done in paper, but it's all done electronically, so it happens that much faster. In fact, 97% of all this type of transaction is done electronically. Think about this for a second. What just happened? Hey, Reverend James Stern, who's watching, I need $10 billion. Okay, and I've got these treasury bonds I'm going to give you, and you give me $10 billion in reserve notes, which acts as currency. And it's going to be backed by the treasury bonds that I'm going to give you. Okay, so I get the Federal Reserve notes, and I put them in my bank, the U.S. Treasury, or my bank. Now I got $10 billion. Are you following me? Are you following me? Was there a job? Was gold or silver transferred? Was there employment? What was there? Nothing. Nothing. Ink on paper, now electronically done. All right, it gets better. Okay? It gets better. So what happens is money equals debt. So you see, the Fed, the American government, got a reserve note, or a bank who can do the same thing because they wrote their own rules. They got a reserve note, which is debt. Money equals debt. Money doesn't equal credit. It equals debt. Following me? Okay, now, so what the Fed does now with that, and now they have this bank deposit, and this is beautiful, because what happens now is something that'll blow your friggin' mind, and I wish I could do it. Okay, so now money equals debt now, because debt was created out of thin air and money was created out of thin air. So there's an IOU. That's what a treasury bond is. It's debt. So to get the money, they created debt. So our government is based on debt, not creating money from debt or creating debt into money. So now the USA takes the $10 billion and they do this. But let's shift right here. A bank takes the $10 billion and they do this. They put it into the fractionalized reserve economic system. So that $10 billion in bank reserve deposits, that the banks must carry a reserve. Okay, in order for that $10 billion deposited in this bank, the bank, in order for them to accept that $10 billion in deposit, they have to carry a reserve to cover that $10 billion of debt that was deposited. Okay, now in doing that, it's 10%. They have to have $1 billion in money to cover the $10 billion that's deposited. In other words, they have to have $1 billion of debt reserves in order to cover $10 billion of debt reserves. Because the debt or the money was created out of debt, trading treasury bonds for reserve notes, debt that the Federal Reserve controls by issuing their own rules. No gold, no silver, okay? So that $10 billion and that 10% is a $1 billion reserve. So that leaves $9 billion for now that bank where the $10 billion was deposited to go lend out to you and me. And commercial loans and house loans and equipment loans and car loans and property loans. Okay? So it gets even better. Where did that $9 billion come from? It came out of thin air. I love this stuff because it's so devious. It is so devious that it's a work of art. It's a painting worthy of Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, it's worthy of the finest artisan and creation in the world. It's so beautiful. We've been all screwed our whole lives because the money in your pocket is worthless. It was created out of dead air. Debt. Okay, now watch this. So now they've got $9 billion to lend to you and me. So what they're allowed to do, though, and this is the beautiful thing about it. Remember we talked about the $10 billion that was deposited and the $9 billion that they have to lend? They're allowed to add the $9 billion back into the $10 billion. So now they have $19 billion of assets. Oh my God. This is better than the Italian mafia, man. This is better than the drug cartels. This is better. This is the greatest money laundering scheme, and it was totally legal. It's totally legal to do. By the Fed, not you and me. Okay? So now they got $20 billion in reserves. Oh, it gets better. Because what they do, when you go borrow the money, they issue you a promissory note to pay it back. And what is that promissory note? That's a note. That's a mortgage. Okay? What is a promise? It's a check. Okay? What is a promissory note? I promise to pay the money back that you gave me. Even though the money you gave me is not really money and it was created by you, I promise to pay you back the money that I'm making that's really not real, but you're going to get it all back anyway because you have the ability to create the money out of thin air right back to the beginning when you indebted the government through a treasury bond, which you hold as collateral. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right, it gets better. I'm telling you, this is a story that you could write the greatest movie of all time on. Now remember, we talked about that $9 billion in debt. The reason why you might think this is really boring and not interesting, because economy and economics was taught to you at a young age, and me too, that it was boring. Oh, you don't have to worry. Oh, no, just go work and you'll get some sort of currency and you'll be happy, right? We've been enslaved before we were born. Okay? And you don't even know it. Beautiful thing. Absolutely beautiful thing. So now, that $9 billion, that deposit that was made to the bank, and the reserve of 10% of $1 billion. And remember, I told you how they can now wrap the $9 billion back into the $10 billion that was originally deposited. Now they have $20 billion. Well, guess what? They do this over and over and over and over. Why fix a broken time? Why fix something that ain't broke? Why start something new when your madness is working beautifully? Over and over and over and over. That $10 billion that they originally created debt from when the United States government gave them treasury bonds as collateral can equal $90 billion. And it can go on for infinite time into perpetuity. And then you know what they do with those treasury bonds? They sell them to foreign governments like China. They sell them to governments like Iran and to Russia. That's what they do. The Fed has friggin' sold out our nation. And Woodrow Wilson signed it off 2 days before Christmas in 1913. Why do you say, have you ever dawned on the question, why do we owe anybody in the world anything? Because we got sold out. And they kept us so dumb and stupid about economics for the last 100 years, 110 years, that we let it happen. And they falsify and fake with words that say federal, and it's a bunch of silly putty. Why can't the president say no more treasury bonds being sold to Japan? Because he can't. Why can Congress and Senate say shut the Fed down? They can't. Because the Fed holds the collateral of you. That's why my buddy Jordan Maxwell talks about that you and me, all we are is like cattle to slaughter. We're part of the collateral that the Fed owns. We've been sold out. And that's how money is created out of nothing. You say, well, what does that matter to me? I can still buy a car. Yes, you can. Absolutely. It should matter to you for this reason. Because the money that you actually have is worthless. Unless you turn it into gold or silver, it's worthless. And at some time, the Fed can jerk around their system any way they want. And they can say, you know something? The money that we've been issuing for 110 years, we're not going to issue it anymore. That's it. We're changing to puka shells. That's going to be currency now. We're changing to electronic dollars, but you have to have an RFID chip put in the back of your neck when you're born. And it's just going to be like Star Trek. You get credits. So money, you can forget your money. It's gone. See, they can do anything they want at any time. All right. I needed to explain that because I wanted you to understand where money really comes from. So every opportunity you can, you got to do a couple of things with your money. And this is one, buy gold. Buy a gold coin. Buy silver coins. Because that's money. That's currency. That's a metal. That comes from God's blue-green earth. That's value anywhere on this planet. And probably in some other world in our galaxy. The third thing you have to do. Well, let's make that the first thing. Buy silver first and buy gold. Gold's running a little over $1,300 an ounce. Silver's running at about $20 an ounce right now, give or take. Don't put your money in the bank Only keep enough money in the bank, that debt money, that paper debt money, to pay the paper debt bills that you have that we've been enslaved on, that really have no value or truth to them at all. We've all been bushwhacked and beguiled into thinking that's what money is. Just keep enough in the bank to do that. The third thing you need to do, don't think your safety deposit box they can't get to. They can, really easily. They just issue a letter. The Fed issues a letter to the bank and says, we want their safety deposit box. Oh, by the way, in 1917, before Wilson left us as president, he also gave us the Tax Reform Act of 1917. See, up before 1917, Americans weren't taxed. We kept all our earnings. And you can thank Woodrow Wilson for that. Man, he sold this country out. That's why he's the most traitorous president this country's ever seen. So not only is our money worthless, we're taxed on this falsified idea of money, so we work and enslave ourselves all year long to pay money and tax to the IRS, which in itself is not governed by the president, Congress, or the Senate either. Because guess who wrote the rules for that? The bank cartels. See, the bank cartels never have to qualify through the Fed how much money they make. So the taxes that they pay it just because they don't want you to be mad at them. But if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to jail. See, we have no representation anymore. We haven't had representation by our Senate and our congressmen and the Treasury Department for over 110 years, since the end of the Civil War, 170 years. We're getting taxation without representation. Okay. Fourth thing we have to do is buy dirt. You got to buy some dirt, man. You got to buy some real estate. You got to. You got to buy something, some dirt, and pay it off. So you don't owe this cartel the money. That's not real money anyway. You got to pay that dirt off so it's yours, short of paying the property taxes. And I got the place for you to do it. I'm going to make you $1 billion right now. You need to listen to Jesse T. I can't help it being me, Jesse T. The Brown Beauty is on duty, Jesse Torero. Talking about money. Talking about the sweetness of what money is and where it came from and how it is and the value of money. Now we're talking about what to do and what you need to do. I'm going to give you the secret ingredient. Proposition 64 in November is going to be the proposition that's going to make recreational marijuana legal in the state of California. It's already medicinally legal in the state of California. 9 states across the nation have the same bill proposition on their ballots in November. And 9 of them are going to all go legal. We're going to have almost 15 states in America with recreational marijuana and over 35 states with medical marijuana use and legal and legal. The prohibition is going to be raised, just like the alcohol prohibition in the early 1920s in the 28th Amendment when it was erased. Prohibition is going to be raised at some point in the next 2 to 5 years. Here's the problem. You can't grow it to any amount that you can create a $1 billion empire, but yet they're growing it. Okay? All across this nation. Because in some areas, in some states, you're allowed to grow it. But here's the problem. The banks, because of federal rule, the Federal Reserve and the FDIC won't allow you to put it into their banks. And why? Because they haven't designed the rules and the laws to control that money yet. That commerce, that currency. That's another conversation. Let's get to it. When that passes here in California, we are going to become a state that's going to lead the country in billions and billions of dollars of tax revenue. We're going to blow off Colorado, which was the first one. Okay? When that happens in recreational use, there are going to be growers growing at some point in time as the laws come down the path. Well, let me tell you something. Here it comes, folks. Here it comes. I'm going to give it to you. I am going to give it to you like you've never gotten it before. This is your gravy train. This is your path to become a multimillionaire. This is your time. This is the opportunity for you to change your life. This, what I'm about to tell you, I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to share it with you for free. And why? Because I'm Jesse T. That's what I do for you and me. I'm going to share it with you. There's no seminar. There's no educational series. I'm going to tell you what to do. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. Here it comes. There's a sleepy little town outside Victorville, California. I hope you're listening across America, because y'all are going to come to me. I'm a real estate broker here in California, and I'm a loan broker, loan specialist as well for almost 40 years. Here it comes. There's a sleepy little town outside Victorville, California. And I know you know where Victorville is. Yes, sir. I know you know. It's on the way to Vegas. Up the 15 freeway, coming through the Cajon Pass from San Bernardino County or LA County, coming up the Pear Blossom Highway. It's right off the freeway. Sleepy little town. That is the worst place in the world to live. Horrible. Nothing but low-life criminals. No industry, no business. In the city of Los Angeles, not the county, not San Bernardino County, in the city of Los Angeles, you're allowed to have medicinal marijuana permits and licenses to sell medicinal marijuana, but you're not allowed to grow it in any great number. You can have 96 plants, but you can't transport it. You can't take it out of your warehouse, drive it down the street. So they do that all in the cloak of dagger, 007, in the middle of the night. Okay? Keep that in mind. There's a sleepy little town that's one of the worst places to be in the world. And I've been there because I've sold real estate there. But something happened of May of 2016. And that something is going to make you a millionaire. Because you're going to come to me, Jesse T, because I'm ahead of the game. I'm always on the cutting edge. I'm always out there at the end of the box. I'm always jumping off into the shark-infested waters. I throw the mud on the wall and the risk at the table. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. I'm always out there looking for the next best opportunity. And here it comes. There's a sleepy little town outside Victorville, California called Adelanto. 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 And it's going to go down in the history books as the first place in Southern California, and for the most part, California, as the first place that the city council of Adelanto and their mayor and their government created an ordinance and passed it in May of 2016. Are you ready? They've created, in the first time ever, Cheech Marin has already jumped in on this, and so has Snoop Dogg. Ready? The ordinance is the ordinance that covers the ability for anybody that has a warehouse in Adelanto, California, to be able to grow marijuana plants with great numbers. It's called the Cultivation Zone Ordinance. newly established medical marijuana cultivation zones. So now you don't have to have only 96 plants. You can have 30,000 square feet of plants in a warehouse. And guess what? There aren't any warehouses to speak of in Adelanto. Lots of desert land, some infrastructure, but not many warehouses. The designation has been in effect since May 25th, 2016, and is not dependent on Proposition 64 passing in November anyway. These properties provide a secure space where a grower may be able to begin cultivating on a smaller level while expanding building and power to accommodate to a full Type 4 license of almost 25,000 square feet of growing capacity under a canopy. In other words, indoor. Great for an investor or user, will allow you to grow legally now and will perhaps, I'm going to repeat that, it will allow you to grow legally now and will perhaps place you ahead of the rest for the recreational use in the event that Proposition 64 passes in California in November. And I'm here to tell you, you know, folks, I'm politically inclined in the city of Los Angeles. I know a lot of stuff at the state, the county, and the city. And I'm telling you now, straw polls have been done by very, very intelligent people who are in the political arena. And there's almost a 70% acceptance by the voters in November to make California a recreational state. Oh, man! Adelanto is a county in San Bernardino, 9 miles northwest of Victorville, off Interstate 15. The cultivation zone is a designated section in an industrial park in certain parts of the town, south, north, east, and west. The medical marijuana cultivation ordinance allows for the indoor cultivation of medical marijuana only. This is one of the few municipalities, few cities, where you can currently grow medical marijuana, bingo, legally. This is a rare and valuable opportunity to own legal, indoor, huge and large cultivation facilities. And I got 3 of them for sale. Do you know if you have 96 plants and you're growing, you're going to make $1 million? 96 plants, you can grow 96 plants of marijuana in a small little 7,000, 8,000 square foot building. What if you had 30,000 square feet? And you could have as many plants. 96 plants will make you a millionaire legally in the city of Los Angeles. Come on. You should be calling me right now at 818-800-1343. You should be getting to me right now at winwinwininc@yahoo.com. You should be going to my Facebook page at facebook.com/Jesse Terrero Broker. You want to get on and become a billionaire? You buy yourself a warehouse. And here's the rub of it. Here's the beauty of it. And I'm going to get to that too. It's amazing. The indoor medical marijuana cultivation ordinance, which has been deemed as the most liberal of ordinances in Southern California, and for that matter, in California to date, took effect May 25th, 2016. Adelanto is one of the few municipalities where you can currently grow medical marijuana legally with a CUP, that's called a conditional use permit, as long as you're in the cultivation zones. I know where they're at. These properties that I am marketing, my friends, you got to get on board here. You can legally cultivate in a facility, whether or not Prop 64 passes or not, you can still cultivate for medical marijuana usage. You can buy them all. Billions are going to be remade. Billions are going to be made when Prop 64 passes in California. Hey, in America, it's a $7 billion business, growing and medical use marijuana. It's a $7 billion business. Within 2 to 5 years, it's going to be estimated $250 billion business. In Colorado, the state of Colorado is finally able to fix everything in the friggin' state because they were the first. And the money that they've made, they're giving money away. You want some money? Go to Colorado. There's another tip. Boy, I'm full of tips today. That's why I love the real estate loan game. Man, you understand money. When you understand how money was created and where it comes from, when you understand money, you understand honey. And you can get to where you got to go faster. I just gave you an edumacation. Did I just say edumacation? Look at, you got to get aboard on this. Okay? It's coming. Lifting the prohibition is coming. We're starting a bank, my partner and I. And we're starting a bank. And we're going to make that happen too. We're going to be the first bank in America to be able to gather up deposits. We're looking for a $4 million investment there. But here we go. Get involved in something new. It helps people. It's not what it used to be. Cheech Marin has already bought a warehouse. Snoop Dogg has already bought a warehouse. Go figure. You want money? Follow where the money's going. An ordinance was just passed, and I just gave you the insight on how to make this thing happen for yourself. Get in touch with me, Jesse Terrero, the Brown Beauty on Duty. Jesse, Mr. Soul Terrero, your trusted real estate broker and loan specialist for almost 40 years here in Southern California. 818-800-1343. 818-800-1343. I want to make you a millionaire. Here's the beauty of it. You know, you can't get a loan from any bank in America, any bank, if they find out that you have a medical marijuana business, even if a medicinal. If you want to expand your medicinal license, you want to expand the building where you're selling medical marijuana legally, and you will go get a business loan. There's not a bank that'll give you a loan. Not a bank that'll give you a loan to buy a car if your primary business is marijuana, MJ. But here we go. Because these are built existing warehouses, and you drop 30% down on an existing warehouse, and you want to run a machine shop, a furniture shop, a flower shop, an exotic dancer shop, whatever you want to do, because it's a business, guess what? 35 to 50% down, I can get you a loan. So you don't have to pay the $1.8 million to $7 million for these 3 buildings that I have for sale. Because that's what's happening. Did you know that in May, these 3 buildings would have barely gotten $500,000 or $700,000 or maybe $8 million? That's how it's jumping. You got to get on it, my friends. You got to get on it. Otherwise, you're going to just say, I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda. And you don't want to be one of those folks. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas are slaves to their lives, which are owned by the Federal Reserve Bank, which are owned by the IRS, because the money that you have is worthless. So you got to get some more of that worthless money and turn it into gold and silver and buy some more dirt. Gave you the keys to success today. The Brown Beauty, Jesse Terrero, is always on duty. Looking for you. I hope you learned a lot. I had a lot of fun talking about this. Thanks for joining us at the Power of Voices and Facebook.com/Jesse Terrero and YouTube Live and downloading our free app and the Facebook.com/The Power of Voices. We're on there and everywhere, every day, Monday through Friday. It's the Jesse T Show. Live at 5, baby, straight on the point. As you enter the world, according to Terrero, I bid you adieu. Open the door for you. And hey, I'm going to Scooby-Dooby-Doo. I'm out of here. The Brown Beauty is off duty. See ya.